Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamed in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shamet, and my good friends joining me, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, New York City. We're recording this during the week of the conclusion of the book of Bamidbar. We are reaching the end of Bamidbar. We have double Parsha Matot Masei. This Shabbat is it's a long Shabbat, a long reading. I'm thinking it's the longest reading of the year. Could be.
It,
Not
it's
so, it's pretty long.
it
It's
is
either
very
this or
long.
Vayakel Pekude.
Yeah.
It's a little deceptive though, because deceptively really long, but a bunch of those psukim are from here to there and from there to here and here to there and there to here, so it's pretty short.
They're short verses, but it's a long thing. I was going to say, when we have long parshiot like this, the way that a service in shul is structured, at least it means I don't get to speak as long, which some people find
Yeah, they
refreshing.
want to add double parshiot.
they love double parsha. I have a standing running joke with my shul. I actually think I'm a pretty good speaker, okay? And people fall asleep all the time. It has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. I say the Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, which is our local hospital, would do a good business if they gave a deal on sleep studies for people, because when people kind of just tune out and fall asleep right away, it means they have sleep disorders, sleep apnea. And anybody who's watching here or listening to us ought to know that if you fall asleep during a rabbi's sermon, it's not the rabbi's problem, although sometimes it is.
Sleep apnea is the opposite, by the way. It's when you can't you have trouble breathing, so you keep waking
You
up.
keep waking up, right? But that means that you fall asleep, at the
Well,
drop
you
of a
don't know
hat.
that.
You have a sleep disorder means that you don't have quality sleep. So it means that when you sit and listen to something or watch something and fall immediately to sleep, there's some it's not optimal. At any rate, we don't want people sleeping through our parsha talk, and because this
I think
is
it's impossible. Who could sleep during a bunch of
you know, people always say to me, I get so many beautiful comments. They love our Parsha talk. They love the fact that, we're funny and we're alive and we're just lively, not alive. We are Chaya Olam Natavidochenu. We eternal life is planted in our soul. I used that line this week in a eulogy, and God bless Phyllis Novick, Zichrona Livracha, who at one point or another also watched our Parsha talk. So good. Masei, Matot Masei, two Parshiot. I want to focus a little bit on Masei because I'm stumped by something at the beginning of Parshat Masei. Uh, I usually rhapsodize about the journey of the Israelites. I, I don't know why I love these things. It's such a we do sing it with a different melody in shul. We've talked about it in the past, but there's something very interesting. If you look at chapter 33, verse 2, after it says "Ela Maseh b'nei Yisrael," it's a kind of summative statement about the journeys of Israel from Egypt to through the desert, and then it says "Vayichtov Moshe et motzaehem lemasehem." Moses wrote down it, in English we would say comings and goings, but it's their goings and coming, or going out. Motzaehem means their exits, limmasehem, towards their journeys, al pi Adonai. He is writing it at God's command. Ve'ele masehem, the motzaehem, and here the following list. These are the journeys according to their exits. So the pshat, or the pashat pshat of this text, is that we're going to get an itinerary of the journey, and the itinerary is going to be based on they left one place and they arrived at that place. They left that place and arrived at another place. So it's leaving and arriving and leaving and arriving and leaving and arriving, and that sets up, I think, not only something beautiful in terms of imagining a journey, but it also it's musical, it's rhapsodic, it's striking in the sense that when you think about the journeys of a life, you think about when you go out and come out. I've used that, and I'm going to use the word trope in describing, when people have moved throughout their lives. Typically in a eulogy frame, it will be, someone who moved from different places to different places. Vayesu, vayachanu, vayachanu, what is it? Vayesu miyamsu, vayachanu b'midbar sin, right? I remember once it was a rabbinic colleague. His wife passed away, and they had moved to many different places. And I used this as vayisu vayachanu vayisu vayachanu.
Nice.
Very nice. So
Nicely
so
done.
so my question really is. So Moses is writing this down, and I'm struck by the fact that he's writing a text down, and that the Torah in general does not make a lot of reference to writing. Um, and I'm going to point to you, Jeremy. Just if you could just enumerate for us a couple of examples of writing in the Torah, where the Torah it's meta Torah, which is Torah speaking about writing text, and Torah speaking about writing text that become part of the Torah, or Torah speaking about writing texts that become part of life or become part of the fabric of the people or the people's lives. Go ahead.
So I will give you a few examples of this, but just to um, put a little focus on why the question is significant. What is it that we imagine a kind of original Torah community? Um, do we imagine a fundamentally oral thing, um, as the Mishnah, is Torah Shebaal Peh until Rabbi Yehuda Anasi comes along? It is taken to be forbidden to commit any of that stuff to a writing medium. It's supposed to be entirely discourse and talking.
Yeah.
But we call Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, refers really to the five books of Moses, and the other books of the Tanakh have a kind of intermediary status, but they are certainly written, and they are preserved in scroll form. And we know that at the roughly in the way we count things now, in the first Christian century, in the time of the destruction, thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we know that communities had those things, but those are long after the original sources. Um, you kind of think, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God speaks to Moses, and this is what I want you to tell them, and it seems like it's oral primarily. However, it's not the only thing, and you sometimes have some references to transmitting, and this is obviously one of them, to transmitting sacred information from Moses. And there is some sort of inscription on some sort of surface. So after the first war with Amalek, in a very interesting verse, God says to Moses, "Ktov zot zikaron basefer, v'sim ba'oznei Yehoshua." Write this down on it doesn't mean a book like we
Document.
have, some scroll. Write this down on some sort of scroll and put it in Joshua's ears. Putting it in his ears sounds like it's primarily oral, but to have it a text, a formal text, you have to write it on a book. You have the ritual trial by ordeal of the suspected adulteress. There you have the curse written out on a scroll, on a sefer, with a divine name. The power of those words get blotted out into water. She has to drink them to internalize them. Of course, the most prominent example is
Ten Commandments.
the tablets, the Shnei Luchot Habrit, v'chatavti al luchot. God says, and I will re-inscribe them on this second set that was on the first set that you broke. And most of the usages of the verbs for writing in the Torah refer at one level or another to the tablets. The divorcing husband has to the Chatavla Sefer Kritut. He has to write her a bill of divorcement. That is a ritual that seems to be executed through some form of writing. But this is not the Torah. This is Ezekiel. But there are at least two examples in Ezekiel that are super interesting. One, Ezekiel has this vision in which God extends him a scroll, and he eats the scroll. So I'll get the exact wording here. This is the end of chapter 2, and then into chapter 3. Vayomer Elai ben Adam et asher timtza echol. This thing which I give you, eat it.
Eat it,
Echol et ha-megillah hazot.
which is
Consume this scroll, eat the
unbelievable.
scroll.
No.
V'lech diber el Beit Yisrael, and go. V'lech daber el Beit Yisrael. Go speak to the house of Israel. V'eftach et pi, v'ya'achileni et ha-megillah hazot. I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. And he said to me, Vayomer Elai ben Adam, bitnecha ta'achel ume'echa timaleh. Feed your stomach, eat in your stomach, and fill your belly at the Megillah Hazot, asher ani noten elecha, ve'ochla vatihi, and I ate it, vatihi befi kidvash lamatok, and it was as sweet as honey to me. So he internalizes the divine message, and and um, and goes and gives it to the people. That kind of makes sense. It would not have made sense. And I saw the angelic figure, and he said, "Here is a smartphone." What is that? These things make sense if and only if your audience knows what it looks like that there's a sefer. And how about Jeremiah? Jeremiah has a similar thing. And who does Jeremiah have as his right hand dude? Baruch ben Neriah
There you go.
is
Scribe.
the scribe. He writes down what Jeremiah says. So I have to imagine that in biblical times, while it seems logical that there's a priority of an oral over written, and the Torah itself does not have a lot of examples, it seems like it makes sense only in a context where people would know what a scroll looked like.
So
Or
I would make two suggestions. First of all, I think an important motto are the luchot, because we assume, I think correctly, that on the luchot are the words that Bnei Israel had previously heard. So that the function of the luchot on one level is an ed de memoir, so that they know what was said. They now have a text that they could look at. But the other function of writing is to make the words physical. The rabbis have this expression that words are not a masa. They're not an action because they don't really exist. We hear them, but what gives them existence is when we write them down or when we inscribe them on a rock. And some of the rituals that you mentioned, it was very important in order to digest the words. They have to have physical substance. And, the end story of the first Luchot is that Bnei Israel ended up eating those too,
so
right? Because Moses ground them into powder and made them drink.
I think this is such a fascinating, topic because we take it for granted, even in our scribal culture of a Torah, which is unusual, in modernity, that we're still, here we are a people that still, as an act of ritual and devotion, reads from a written scroll, a handwritten scroll, on a regular basis. And Barry, when you mentioned that inscribing the words of the commandments on the tablet so that they were read, I would just remark that actually the tablets are not read; they're just deposited in the box. Nobody reads them anymore. And in fact, it reminded me, just as you were speaking, that we inscribe these words. We are to write the words of God, a piece of text on our doorposts. And we all have mezuzot. We roll up the mezuzah, a tiny paragraph of the Shema and Vayayim Shema, in a little kind of scroll, mini scroll. We put it in a box and we affix it to our doorpost. We never read it. I've taken, recently I heard of the idea of just taking the cloth and framing it and putting it next to the door, and I've done that, and I get such a little moment of inspiration every time I walk inside my house now, because I see the words of the Shema next to me as I walk in. I'm going like, oh
You
yeah,
feel more
okay.
protected now?
It's not that I feel protected, but I feel an awareness that I don't have. I have an awareness when I walk inside a house with a mezuzah that I'm entering a Jewish place because it's a Jewish symbol. When I see the cloth open, I see Shema Yisrael, and it's like for a millisecond I have it in my head, Okay.
I would just add, it goes beyond that because I think when you see the words, that leads to understanding.
Ah,
But I think the part of the function originally of the mezuzah was as a kind of an amulet. So you don't
Well,
need to see the words; it's enough that they're there
so
on
look,
and
the
that is,
door. But I wanted to add one other thing. There is this tension that we sometimes overlook. The most common phrase in the Torah is Vayadaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. The transmission of the Torah from God to Moshe, Moshe to Bnei Israel, was almost entirely oral because, as you pointed out, there are only a handful of references to writing in the Torah itself. We listen to the Torah read, even though many of us are following along in a Chumash, that's also an oral experience. So that's Torah Shabbat. But I remember how surprising it was to learn that originally the Mishnah and the Talmud were not written down. Apparently, they're not written down until the Gaonic period, and there really was Torah Shabbat. But since the Gaonic period, most of us access Torah Shabbat with a book.
well,
We don't listen to it orally, so we have like a flip.
the reason why is because writing is expensive, and it requires a
Don't
lot
ruin
of
the
time.
story.
What's that?
Don't ruin the story.
No, it requires a specific talent, specific materials, and a great deal of time to do that. And it's much easier to carry a book in your head off by heart than it is to write it down and put it in a briefcase. Or I mean, we have volumes. The Talmud is about what, 40 volumes, and
20.
no, it's
you know
you printed it,
The
you printed
Vilna
it
Shas is 20 volumes.
yeah,
20
okay.
volumes.
So
Yeah.
I mean, look, the codices of these books were huge, you know,
So I
and
have to share a story.
yeah, go ahead.
I had Baruch Schwartz for Bible when I was in Israel many, many years ago. I remember him telling the class that there's no need for anyone to memorize the Tanakh. It's a little book. It fits in your pocket. You could take it anywhere. If you're going to memorize something, memorize the Talmud, because who could schlep that around with them?
Do you know? I mean, apropos of that, we are in a totally new era now when it comes to writing and text. And we've talked about this in the past, but it's worth talking about it now because, I feel very proud of my library. But if I were starting out in rabbinical school now, I probably would not be in buying books the same way that I bought books back then because everything's online. And
I'm
So
so
what
I'm
would you
so,
do on Shabbat?
so you
so
might
Would
have
you
a few books.
change?
if I needed to have a book for Shabbat,
You get a Shabbos guy to turn on the
no.
computer.
No.
Here's what happens apropos of sleep disorders. You sit with a book and you read a paragraph, okay?
You fall asleep.
Okay. This is what happens on Shabbos, okay? Let's be honest, okay? I read by paragraph on Shabbos, okay?
I
No, so
read a
It's
book on
usually
Shabbat.
usually the same paragraph over and over and over again.
well, Barry,
Well, you have to get around.
you're a great reader. But so I just want to like this is really fascinating. Um, you know, first of all, we are all the students of the students of Shaul Lieberman, the greatest Talmudist of the last hundreds of years. And Lieberman says, first of all, there is no reference in rabbinic literature to or in Tannaitic literature at least, probably in Amoraic, but to somebody reading Mishnah on a written surface. You do have, of course, in the Gemara, you do have, shalach laho. They sent a message to, and it could have been a person, but it's that sounds like it's maybe some sort of written source. And Lieberman, of course, like I remember Meir Rabinowitz said, the theory of the Babylonian Talmud could not possibly have been, you know, committed to memory. It's just too vast. And he says, but I knew Shaul Lieberman, and he did have it committed to memory. He
Yeah.
just he knew it all with prodigious memory. But there's in this highly academic kind of way of talking about these things, there's like observations that oral cultures and written cultures think differently and learn differently and communicate differently. If you are in a fundamentally oral culture, um, you have a lot more poetry and mnemonics and lists and you can only do it with other people. It's
That's the key
fundamentally
point, is that an
communal.
oral culture requires more than one person.
it's exactly right. You have to sit around in a group, and there's a reciter, and that's how you have a discussion. If you are in a written culture, we still have a tradition of chavruta over books, but if you are in a written culture, I can open up a book about China and go someplace that is unrelated to my own realm of experience, and I can go there all by myself, and I don't really know exactly how to take away that there's a big difference in that, but I don't know exactly what to do with that fact. But one is a kind of a solitary, at least possibly solitary, and as you said, very expensive because it takes a lot to copy a book. You have to be rich to copy a book. You have to have a specialized set of skills, and and the other is fundamentally this is us telling our story and talking about our experiences, and I think that's pretty interesting.
So, what do you think the writing of the? I mean, there are very few examples of writing in the Torah itself. This is one of them, and it's a long list, 42 places, and vayisu vayachanu, vayisu vayachanu. You know, it's repetitive, it's rhythmic, etc. And the process of writing it down, and God telling Moses to write it down, mean what do you think it means?
So what I would suggest is this. That curious phrase of Pi Adonai means that these were the places that God directed the people. And it may be that we also have to think about what's left out, places that they might have gone that God did not direct them. And it's only by writing them down that a person would not confuse the two.
Interesting.
So I would suggest that they went to more than 42 places, but only 42 were at God's instruction. And that's why they're written down.
That's interesting.
What would be your take? Well, you know, if you had to kind of, you know, offer a theory as to why this text, why write your journey down, and why write these? I mean, and I would go, you know, I mean, there's beautiful commentary. Rashi talks about this, quoting the Midrash. He said, "Look, all of these are code names for different events and
Yeah.
stories that happen, you know, and so that the writing of the places is a kind of it's their it becomes sacred. That is to say, here's a text that tells of a journey. It's directed by God, and the journey itself is the story here, and therefore, even though you've lost all of the significance of this, you know, we'll always have Paris. You know, I mean, you know, the viewer of the movie Casablanca knows what they mean, but if if you didn't see the movie, you wouldn't know what is Humphrey Bogart talking about when he says we'll always have Paris.
Paris Hilton.
Paris, Texas. Um, I don't really know what to make of it. I'm embarrassed to say this. I'm just like, there are parts of the Torah that just make your eyes glaze over.
No, I don't think this.
So this is the first journal.
This is a
And
journal, right? Yeah.
and I think that's important because I think, since we're speculating, that I imagine people have to have recourse to this. It's not like some of the other written texts that Jeremy had mentioned, like the one that Ezekiel 8, or the one that the Sota, the suspected adulteress, will ingest. This one has to have people have to be able to get to it at some point.
So that's so interesting. It's a good segue. I was in a Jewish bookstore recently, and
They still have.
they still have Jewish bookstores in Teaneck. And I stumbled across this book, which is called That Jewish Moment. I'm sure the author will be very happy that I put it up here. Sari Kopitnikov. Okay, and this it's a you know, and since we're being broadcast live at Machane Ramah in the Berkshires, so we could offer this as a suggestion to the campers and the Chanichim, all of our friends there, if we still have any. And that is, it's so great at camp to be able to journal, right? And I don't know how popular journaling is today among kids. Do kids still journal? I mean, nobody writes
I'll tell you
letters.
one thing. I'll tell you one thing that I learned when I visited camp on Monday of this week. Um, they have done a great job of making it a screen-free experience.
Good for
If,
them.
if people journal, I think that likely to just do it on electronic media because you never lose it and
Yeah.
it's in the cloud and uh, but camp is a screen-free media. I mean, I'm I'm sure there's some of the breach, but that's what they're trying.
Do you know, I mean, some of the great literature in Judaism, their journal. I mean, Mordechai Kaplan, have you ever read his journals? There's
No,
they're phenomenal. They're amazing documents. Theodor Herzl, great journalist, right? Journal writer. Okay. Elie Wiesel, journal. Lots of who else? Tons of journal people. All right, so we're coming to the end of this, and I didn't mention this before we recorded, but we do have to take note of the passing of a very important rabbi, his teacher at the seminary, Rabbi Harlan Wexler. Rabbi Harlan Wexler passed away. Um, he did you ever have him?
no,
I
I
had
know
him.
him.
I had
Did you have
Rabbi.
him for brachot? He
I
taught
had him
brachot
at.
my first
He
year.
taught a he taught a class called the Theology of Masechet Brachot.
Yeah.
I think it was. I don't want to say it was the single most important class that I had at the seminary, but because he would be too, he was a very humble person, but it was such an important class.
And that was your first year.
It was the
That
first year.
says a lot about the seminary education.
Exactly. No, but you know what the assignment, the term assignment was that we had to study Masechet Brachot from cover to cover and make a personal index of it. And I was going through stuff. I have a card catalog, index cards. I wrote, different things and quotes and things from Masechet Brachot, and then I compiled it in an alphabetical index. And I showed it to him, and I got an A in the class. He was very, very happy. And I learned a lot. And of course, Masechet Brachot, I just started redoing it because relearning it. Believe it or not, I'm thinking about Pesach next year, and you know, if there's one Masechet that you should study, it would be Masechet Brachot.
You know that Brachot is in the standard printed edition of the Talmud, 64 pages,
It's the
and
longest tractate, though.
and yet it is the longest tractate. So, we have certain conventions, like Baba Batra is 176 pages in the standard Talmud, because you got these big long Tosafots on the page. You might have a very small amount of text and a large amount of commentary on the page. In Brachot, you tend not to have that. Um, but if you say to yourself, exactly as we just observed, well, what did the Chazal, what did the Talmudic era sages and Mishnaic era sages spend their most amount of time on? It's this. It's
This,
the
yeah,
it's the conventionally religious stuff of worship and blessings and the kind of spiritual experience of putting your back to the questions in some ways that this abuts the questions about written media and oral media. Um, what do we want to the thing about brachot, the thing about tefillah is that you put some spiritual experience, some spiritual hope, and you express it in the medium of words.
yeah,
And that's Jews are good at
So,
this.
but what I would say, Elliot, which I think is important, is that Masachet Brachot gives you great insight into the rabbis, not so much into the Talmud. You don't learn a lot about Talmud by studying Masachet Brachot, as important as it is, because the method of the Masachet is so different from all the other Masachtot.
true. I don't want to be, I feel more inclined to the Bible altogether. I can deal with that. I can deal with
It's
that.
funny that you say that. I feel so much more. You are a story guy, a narrative guy, and
Yeah,
when we get to a story, you want the story behind the story, and there's
yeah,
little
Even if we
exactly.
don't get to a story, once a story.
I
yeah,
do.
that's right. I feel much more connected to the rabbis than to the Bible.
Yeah. That's all. I mean, look, I felt just, as we're doing this, personal. So I opened the Masechet and I've studied the Masechet, two or three times. And, do you ever have this experience when you open a text and you feel like, I'm coming, I'm home. There is a homecoming feeling to rereading a familiar text. I mean, Barry, you're a reader. Unusually you reread books. Many
Well,
people.
that's what I've learned in my old age, that the real pleasure is not reading, it's rereading.
Yeah, I have to learn that. I'm not a rereader. I like
It
to.
cuts down the number of books you read by half.
Well,
That's
as
the
opposed,
problem.
yeah,
Yeah, but then you know what you get. You know what you get. You read something. Sometimes you feel like I've come home and especially if you are in fact reading on a paper and glue technology. But sometimes I see my handwriting here. I know I've been here before. I do not have any memory of ever seeing this, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
the
a
worst thing is my notes I wrote in pencil, which is faded. I can't even read them.
yeah.
Aside from the visual, that it's a lot smaller than my eyes can accommodate.
Lots of things to talk about. Rabbi Harlan Wexler, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing. Wonderful, wonderful human being, beautiful, beautiful individual. We want to say thank you to all of our viewers and listeners, especially those at Machane Ramah in the Berkshires. Thank you for hosting us on Kol Ramah 102.3. And we still are the best Parsha podcast ever, ever. So enjoy, and everyone have a beautiful Shabbat. And we look forward to seeing you the next time on our Parsha Talk. So Shabbat Shalom. Take care.
Shalom.